Strategies. This is a great program, and if you have any questions, feel free to just enter them into the chat and we'll go over them at the end. All right, this is effective communication strategies. Today, we are going to explore how communication takes place when somebody is living with any form of dementia. And by the end of today's program, you will be able to explain the communication changes that take place throughout the course of the disease. You'll be able to decode the verbal and behavioral messages that are delivered by someone living with dementia, and then respond in ways that are helpful to the person. And you'll be able to identify strategies to help you connect and communicate at each stage of the disease. And there are just those learning objectives listed again. So if we can go to the next slide, I'll continue. Thank you. All right. Communication is more than just talking and listening. It's really about sending and receiving messages, and that's done through attitude, tone of voice, facial expressions, and body language. And communication is really just a way that we express who we are and how we relate to each other. And as the brain changes with Alzheimer's disease or other dementia-related progression, people lose the ability to speak and decode language in those usual ways. And the better that we understand these changes, the better we can connect with the people who are living with Alzheimer's or another dementia throughout the course of the disease. Now, as Alzheimer's disease and other dementias progress, people, again, they lose their ability to communicate through their thoughts or communicate their thoughts and their feelings through words. They also lose the ability to understand the words that others speak to them. However, they do maintain their sense of self throughout all the stages of the disease. So this means that those elements and those characteristics that make each person unique, those are going to remain part of the person throughout the disease, and connecting with that person's self is really the key to effective communication. You really just want to stay connected and allow them to have a voice as the disease progresses. Now, in the early stage of the disease, there may just be a few noticeable changes in the person's ability to communicate with words, or there might not be any recognizable changes at all. So asking how the person would like to be communicated with and how they'd like to be helped with words can be useful in this stage. And then the language abilities are going to diminish as the disease progresses and communication moves from easy conversation to really relying on the emotions and the five senses to connect. And as care partners and caregivers, you guys are the ones who are going to have to adjust how you communicate, and those of us interacting with our loved ones, we're the ones who have to adjust how we communicate and maintain those connections with them throughout the disease, because they no longer will be able to. So remember that sense of self is going to remain in the person, and remember to respect the person as an adult and adjust your communication style based on what is meaningful to the person in that moment, on that day, no matter what the stage, because especially in the middle stage, it can change on a dime. So you really want to adapt to how the person is communicating in that moment. So now let's take a look at communication throughout each particular stage. And if you're here in weeks past, you'll remember that we talked about there are 3 separate stages of the disease, and early stage is, as the name suggests, at the very beginning, sometimes called mild. And in the early stage, you may or may not see changes in the way the person communicates. For some people, there may be some shift in their ease with words or conversation. And some of those really common changes that you might notice in the early stage include difficulty finding the right word, taking longer to speak or respond, withdrawing from conversation, struggling with decision-making or problem solving, and reacting more emotionally than they did in the past, or even avoiding discussion of the disease and its impact. And whether you notice the changes in the way the person speaks or not, communication in the early stage is crucial. We really talked about this in our last presentation, managing money. This is a period in which everybody involved is adjusting to that diagnosis. Everyone has thoughts and feelings about the changes ahead of them. And denial is a part of the disease for some. For others, the emotions can just feel really, really overwhelming. But coming to terms with the diagnosis and the emotions you are feeling by talking together and expressing your connection is key. This is going to help you guys accept the diagnosis, move forward, and discover new ways to live positive, fulfilling lives. You also want to have those tough conversations that we talked about last week too, about money and care and all of those things that are going to happen later in the disease. And communicating through this process really just brings closeness, and it's going to help everybody adjust a little bit more easily as the disease progresses. Now we're going to hear from Martha Tierney. She's from the Alzheimer's Association home office, and she is going to tell us how we can be more helpful in the early stage. I don't hear her talking. Not sure if anyone else is
communicating in the early stages of dementia with the person with the disease is important. At that time, you still have language as a tool. So you can learn things about what they might prefer as the disease progresses. For example, as the disease progresses, a person might have difficulty finding words. Caregivers often struggle to know what to do in that moment. Early on in the disease, you can ask. You can say, if you ever have trouble coming up with a word, would you rather that I jump in and give you the word, or do you want me to wait and allow you some time so you can find it on your own?
All right. Really good notes from her about asking the person how they want to be communicated with. And one of the best ways to be sure that you are offering the help with communication that the person needs, again, is to ask directly. So if a person struggles to find the right word, you could ask whether it feels better when you supply the word, or if you just wait patiently. Also, make sure you're keeping your sentences direct and straightforward, just so that the person can avoid feeling lost in a conversation. Short sentences can make your meaning clear, and make sure you avoid long explanations and take your cue from the person, and be sure not to talk down to them. And remember that it may take the person longer to find words or put thoughts together and express them. So make sure you allow some extra time for conversation, just so no one feels pressured or rushed. And keep in mind that conversational needs are going to change over time. And in the early stage, the person with dementia really needs to have their voice heard. You can help facilitate this when you meet the person right where they are in that moment, again, regardless of the stage that they're in. And be sure to include the person in any conversation that they want to be a part of, especially if those have any sort of an effect on their future. Those can really be empowering and engaging for the person. And then you, as the caregiver, know that you're doing what they wished for later on. And other points on communication in the early stage: don't make any assumptions about a person's ability to communicate because of Alzheimer's or another dementia diagnosis. This disease really affects every person differently. Speak directly to the person if you want to know how they're doing, and explore which method of communication is most comfortable for the person. It could be letters or emails or phone calls. And remember that it's okay to laugh. Sometimes humor just lightens the mood and makes communication easier. Remember, they maintain their sense of self. If they've always had a levity about life, it's okay to laugh in this situation too. And just be honest and frank about your feelings. Don't pull away. Your friendship is super important. Your support is super important, and will make the process that much easier for the person with the diagnosis. Now on to the communication in the middle stage, which is often the longest stage of the disease. And many changes in the middle stage of Alzheimer's or other dementias really affect communication. So if you notice some of these changes in the early stage, they're likely going to become much more pronounced in the middle stage. And some changes you might notice are listed here. Could be increased difficulty finding the right words, using familiar words repeatedly, inventing new words to find or to describe familiar things, like calling a watch a hand clock, for example, easily losing your train of thought or speaking less often, as well as communicating through behavior rather than words at an increased frequency. Other difficulties include difficulty organizing words logically, reverting to their native language, using more curse words, relying on gestures, having difficulty following a conversation or a TV program, or having difficulty decoding what other people say. And changes in the brain are going to make tracking and decoding words more difficult. And for that reason, people begin to use their behavior to communicate more often in the middle stage of the disease. So we'll talk about some adjustments that you can make to help continue to connect with the person living with the disease. And also note that some physical conditions and medications can affect a person's ability to communicate. So if changes occur suddenly and dramatically, be sure to consult a doctor, because there could be an underlying medical issue that needs to be addressed right away, like a UTI or a side effect of a medication. All right, in this clip, we're going to hear from Beverly and the advice that she gives to caregivers.
I would advise couples, and I usually do advise the caregiver who comes to the group and is caring for a spouse, that you take your time. Always count to 3 before you respond, because it gives you time to think about your answer and what's going on. Generally, in a marital dispute, it's quick, it's just back and forth. You're quick to give an answer. When they've been diagnosed, to sit back and say, okay, you're supposed to be the one that's reasonable here. Let's change how we do this, because there's only one thing you can control, and that's you. You cannot control them and their process.
All right. So a little bit more information on communication in the middle stage. Whenever
Am I the only one that's frozen? I can't hear anything. Or
It seems we are experiencing technical difficulties. We will get those fixed here shortly.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Acacia just let me know that her computer went a little haywire and that she'll be back on in a moment. Does anybody have any questions while we are waiting to get things pulled back up for you guys? There she is.
Okay, I'm back on. Sorry, my Oh my goodness, that was crazy. My computer went crazy and restarted. So give me just a moment to get everything pulled back up and I will continue. Sorry about that. Okay. Communication in the middle stage. When you are communicating with a person in the middle stages, be sure to approach that person gently. Make sure you identify yourself and approach the person from the front and at eye level. Call that person by name and say who you are in relation to the person. For example, say, "Hi, Dad, it's your daughter, Sue," or whatever your name is. And this is just going to help orient that person and get their attention. Sometimes using touch can show that you care, even if your words or are just not understood. A gentle touch can help get a person's attention as well. And be sure to avoid criticizing or imposing your own perspective. It'll likely backfire. Just pay attention to your facial expression, your tone of voice, be calm and patient. That person is going to feel your tension, but they'll also feel your patience. So make sure you're really cognizant of your own tone, and then make sure you're taking time to communicate. Give yourself and the person you're talking with enough time to respond and to interact and connect. And in this next video, we're going to hear about Rebecca and how she adjusts her own thoughts and responses when communicating with her mother.
She could sense my frustration because occasionally I would lose my patience and I would bark at her. Why are you asking me that question again? I just answered that question 2 minutes ago. And then she would get frustrated because, she was very old school and she's like, "Don't disrespect me. And I didn't ask you that question 2 minutes ago. It's a new question." So phase 2 of our relationship was like, okay, that's a new question. I'll answer it again.
All right,
She
more
could sense
on
my frustration.
communication in the middle stage. When you join the person's reality, you take a little bit of time to see the world as they might be seeing it right in that moment. And when seen from their perspective, that person's behavior often becomes a little more understandable to you. And due to the changes to the brain that accompany this disease, that person is probably not going to be able to see your perspective. So you're going to have to be the one who has to change and use respect and empathy and see the world through their eyes. So just remember that joining that person's reality is really key in helping the person to have his or her say, and it provides some soothing and some reassurance. And to do this, you can follow these steps on this slide. So listen to figure out what the person wants or needs. This means paying attention to both the words and the behavior of the person. And keep in mind that the person may be saying something about their feelings or needs, but may be feeling something else on a deeper level, and that also needs attention. For example, the words, "I can still drive just fine," may also contain the feeling, "I don't want to give up my independence. Don't take that from me." And the words, "Stop taking over my life," may actually reflect, "I hate this disease and I don't understand why I can't do what I always could." So let the person know that you understand what they're feeling and why, and whether they express that through their words or behavior or both. Again, just let them know you understand, and then answer any question or address any issue that they bring up. Be brief and to the point. And then, most importantly, make sure you're responding to the emotions behind the behavior or the concern. For example, if the person is communicating with their words, you might say, "You feel sad," or "You seem sad. Do you feel sad?" And then you wait for a response. If the person says yes, you may want to guess the cause, as in, "Do you miss the way things used to be?" And if the person says yes to this as well, you could add that you also miss it. If the person is communicating with their behavior, see if you can identify and speak about the emotion behind the behavior. And if the person is, rummaging through their possessions, that could be a way of communicating boredom or needing something. Hitting during a bath could be a way to say that the person feels too hot or too cold or uncomfortable with being naked or feeling out of control. There are a wide variety of things they could be communicating with their behavior. But once you've responded to the emotions, make sure you reassure and direct that person by encouraging them to do something that may shift the person's thinking and behavior. So with this example, to continue, you could just say, I'm really glad to be here with you today. Let's go for a walk outside. And this way, you're really moving the person from feeling sad to doing something a little more active that can lift their spirits. And if you want any more information on how to respond to particular behaviors, we do have another program that you can tune into sometime. It's called Understanding and Responding to Dementia-Related Behavior. But more on the communication in the middle stages. Keep it slow and basic. Make sure you are taking your time and that you're patient when you communicate. The more you slow down, the less resistance you'll encounter because that person won't feel rushed and unable to keep pace. Rushing really leaves the person feeling frustrated or inadequate or upset with themselves and resistant. And when you're taking your time, you can really avoid that frustration for you and the person with the disease. And then make sure you use short sentences, you use basic words and speak clearly, and also be really specific. It can sometimes help to offer the choice that you think would be the best at the end of a sentence. For example, instead of asking someone, what would you like for breakfast? Because that's really a very open-ended question. Instead, just give them the choices. Say, it's breakfast time. Would you like eggs or oatmeal? And then they can grab onto whatever word you just supplied for them. And it can be very helpful. Make sure you're giving multiple cues. It's always really helpful to give the person as many different cues as you can while you communicate. This can reinforce your words and clarify your message. Provide visual clues and gestures. Avoid any sudden movement and use gentle gestures and pointing, but avoid making sudden gestures. Like, I don't need to give more examples, but really avoid making sudden gestures because that could startle a person. Write things down for the person, reminder notes or calendars or labels or lists. Those can all remind a person of where their things are, can remind them what needs to be done or who's in the person's life. And labeled photos of different things can help the person keep track of names and different relationships that they have. And then be sure to offer some answers in your questions. It's a lot easier for someone in the middle stage to choose what to eat for lunch. Again, if the question is not open-ended, like what would you like for lunch, Bill? These questions, open-ended questions, can really leave someone overwhelmed and stuck for an answer. It can lead to confusion or even refusal, but it's much easier for the person to answer the question like, Bill, I'm making sandwiches for lunch. Would you like ham or turkey? Then again, that person can choose one of the answers that you supplied. And if they seem stuck, maybe you could suggest an answer. Again, if that person is comfortable with you doing that for them. Make sure you're repeating information or questions. Even if you've given a lot of reminders, you'll probably need to repeat information that you provide or questions that you ask. The person may not have been able to decode your message completely the first time, and that repetition can really help. And also be sure to turn negatives into positives. So for example, if you need to get a person into the shower and they resist the task, rather than saying, it's time for your shower, which could trigger some resistance, you could say, let's get you cleaned up for the day so that you'll be ready for Cindy's visit this afternoon. Pair it with something, an incentive for why they'd want to do that task. And be sure to avoid quizzing the person. Quizzing the person or asking them to try harder to remember or telling them that they know the answer and then asking them to think again is really unfair to what's going on in their brain, and it doesn't work. Trying harder is just going to lead to frustration, and it's a lot more respectful and a lot more helpful, and will avoid frustration from the person and you if you just give the person the information that they need for a task or a situation, as long as those as well, excuse me, as those reminders that are needed. Be sure to respond empathically and reassure them as much as possible. Just let them know that you are there, you're listening, and you hear their concerns. The facts are far less important than the person's feelings, okay? And they're far less important than their view of their reality. The feelings and perspectives are very real to the person, and even though they may not match your reality, it's theirs. And so respond to those feelings first and avoid some of the things that they say that may seem crazy to you, because it's not crazy to them. Always provide reassurance that you are together and that you're safe and you're there to help, and let the person know that you hear and understand the thoughts and feelings that they're experiencing. And as long as there's no safety issue, it's going to be a lot easier to just agree with them and go with the flow. Find common ground whenever possible, listen to what they're saying, just agree with them, and make adjustments to the situation that are necessary, and redirect the person to another activity as needed. And all that being said, it's a lot easier said than done, but try to remember, as those things are going to help both of you during those middle stages. And now moving on to communication in the late stage. This is also called severe, more often in a medical setting, but in the late stage, the person may only use a few words, but they still need to connect and communicate. And since the person has lost most functions by the late stage, you may feel a strong urge to do something, but usually your presence and your connection with the person are much more important than doing something specific for the person. So remember that that person is still an adult and they still have that sense of self. And you can connect with that sense of self by remembering their history and respecting their preferences. Remember, the goal is to just help the person feel content and as happy as possible. Keep talking to them, use familiar words or names or phrases, poems or passages or songs, whatever it is that they liked. And whether you get a direct response from the person or not, the sound of your voice is probably going to be soothing to them enough, and it's going to help maintain that connection between the two of you. And one thing that we like to suggest is using the 5 senses to connect with the person living with the dementia in their late stage. So we all know the 5 senses: touch, sight, sound, smell, and taste. Use those because it can help to try to understand the person's feelings in the late stage. So connecting through those 5 senses in whatever way is best for them can really help you to connect and help them feel a little more comfortable. So we're going to hear Sandra now in a video talk about how she connected with her mother in the late stage of the disease.
I know that my mom feels aggravated. I know that she feels alone. I know that she feels confused. And I know on any given day, I don't know if I've made it better for her. I try. In these later stages, I've come to recognize that being really aware of the 5 senses is really important. Touch seems to give her a great deal of comfort. I know when I come over, I'm going to brush her hair all the time. My husband noted to me recently, he said, you know, you should see the look on your mom's face when you're brushing her hair. She's just happy. She's just happy. She doesn't say a lot. And I do it for a long period of time. I comb it, I braid it, I do funny things with it, but it just allows me to just be with her in a way that makes her feel comfortable.
It can really help to try to understand the person's feelings in the late stage, and that's really about all that is going to be able to happen. It's really going to be very one-sided communication. It's going to be you doing most of the communication. You might get a little bit back from the person, especially in the very late stage, but connecting through the five senses is going to be one way that you can connect and help that person feel a little bit more comfortable. So here are some ideas for connecting through touch. And remember, especially with the five senses, this is when you want to revert back to that person's sense of self. So think, did they enjoy different fabrics or different shapes? Did they like lotion? Did they like animals? Were they really artistic and liked using different molding materials or different mediums? Did they really like to be stroked on their arm or their back, or did they like the hairbrush? Think back to the different things that they could do or that they liked to do, and use that to guide how you want to connect with them through their five senses. So again, those are some ways that you can connect through touch. But if the person would rather connect through sight, then you could use that. So here are some different ways that you could connect through the sense of sight. You could laminate brightly colored pictures and look at them together, watch videos of animals or nature or travel, look at photo albums, look at photos of famous paintings or their favorite settings. You could watch birds. You could potentially take them to an aquarium. Again, it depends on where they are at in their stage, as well as where they're at in that moment. If they are able to go outside, or if this all needs to be done inside, if they're able to paint, if they're able to go sit and look at a window. Doing these things together and experiencing the environment together can also help use many senses at once. Feeling sunshine or seeing people, pets walk by, or hearing the nature sounds, feeling the breeze, or you could smell whatever senses are outside, whatever scents are outside. Those are all different ways to connect. But again, you want to think about what they really enjoy per their sense of self, as well as what they're able to handle in that moment, because it could be really overwhelming, or it could, trigger them or cause some bigger issue. So just be very careful about what you choose. You can also use sounds and music to connect, and these are some of the most powerful ways to connect in the late stage. You often hear, not often, but every now and then you hear about someone connecting through music and it bringing back a really crazy memory, or just bringing them back kind of to their old self and having like a moment of clarity. It happens a lot through the sense of sound. It's just a very powerful sense. And if that person likes connecting through sound, or if you just want to try something too, these are different ways that you could connect through sound. You could listen to familiar music. You could listen to sounds of nature or farms. They used to live in a different environment than where they live now. It might be comforting to them. You could listen to different instruments, listen to different songs or speech, especially if they are bilingual or multilingual and you want to listen to something in their native language. You could just read to them, read books or poetry or scripture or newspaper, whatever it is. Just let the person hear your tone of voice and make sure that you're as gentle in your tone of voice as possible. And just a quick reminder to put yourself on mute so that we all can hear. Thank you. And now connecting through smell. The sense of smell is one of our most basic senses. Goodness, I can't speak today. Sorry. The sense of smell is one of our most basic senses. And although this sense may diminish with age and disease progression, you could still use some of the ideas on the slide to connect, especially if they were someone who loved scents. You could make a plastic bag that contains different items for them to smell. It could be herbs or spices or different essential oils or flowers, coffee beans, whatever it is. If you want to combine senses, if there's someone who liked massages and like lotion, use a fragrant lotion, a scent that they really like. You could also light a candle, or just if it's, too dangerous, you could even just have some fragrant candles that are strongly scented when they're unlit. You could smell those together. Scents, again, like sound, can really bring you back to a familiar and a pleasant memory. And it can be a really strong way to connect and, again, give them that moment of clarity. But do keep in mind any allergies that the person has and avoid scents that could aggravate them, as well as lotions or any candles or anything that could cause some sort of reaction. And then with taste, well into the late stage, people living with dementia enjoy tasting favorite foods and flavors. And these are some different ways that you could provide some strong flavor sensations for the person. However, the ability to swallow will diminish as the disease progresses, and choking can become a major hazard. So make sure you're only providing what the person can swallow safely. So it could be favorite foods, baked goods, popsicles, flavored drinks, ice creams, puddings, whatever it is. And even back to sense of smell, even just bringing a baked good or a dish that they really liked, that could be something that they enjoy smelling as well. Even if they're not able to eat it, just don't show it to them to make them sad they can't eat it, but you could bring it around so that they can at least enjoy the scent. So to summarize, maximizing our communication or our connectedness with a person living with dementia involves adhering to a few principles. First off, we need to understand what is and what isn't possible to change by understanding all that we can about the disease. It's important to stay up to date with the latest information and scientific breakthroughs on Alzheimer's disease and other dementias by attending workshops like this or conferences if you can, and know and accept the cognitive and functional limitations of the person, just to help you set a little bit more realistic expectations of the person. So remember, again, that that person is an adult. They have that sense of self, and we always want to respect that. Always remember to use feelings to connect, feelings over facts when you are interacting with a person living with dementia, especially in the later stages. Remember that you convey your mood through your actions and your tone of voice, and the person is going to pick up on that and they'll reflect those feelings. So make sure you're cognizant of your own tone and your own being. And make sure you stay focused on positive feelings for the person. You want to increase your understanding of that person's reality, and make sure you're always showing how much you care for the person and how much you do want to connect. Make sure to listen and observe and try to decode what the person is communicating, whether it's through their words or through their behaviors, because it's going to tell you about their needs and their wants, and you want to respond to that. And then make sure you're joining the person's reality. We really can't say that enough. It's going to allow you to better understand what's needed and can help you intervene as well. And communication is going to evolve throughout the stages of Alzheimer's as well as other dementias, and adapting to those changes will require some commitment. Again, easier said than done, but something important to keep in mind. And by adjusting your communication as the disease progresses, you can still really connect deeply with that person. So now we're going to listen to Dr. Fazio describe a little bit more about being a caregiver.
Taking care of yourself while you care for somebody with the disease not only impacts your own health, but it really can impact the person with the disease. So for example, if you're not getting enough sleep, you might be easily irritated, which will then sort of spill over to your interactions with the person with the disease, and maybe being short with them, which then might cause them to get frustrated. So it's not only important to take care of yourself for your own health, but really for you to really be a good caregiver.
Yes, caring for yourself as a caregiver is of utmost importance, as Dr. Fazio just mentioned. And one service that we offer through the association is our 24/7 helpline. This is available around the clock every single day of the year. And through this service, it's free service, and through it, specialists and master's level clinicians offer confidential support and information to people who are living with the disease, as well as caregivers, families, and the public. And you can contact the helpline day or night to speak confidentially with a master's level care consultant for decision-making support, crisis assistance, education on issues. You can learn about the symptoms of the disease, find out local programs and services. You can get general information about legal and financial care decisions, as well as treatment options for managing symptoms. And you'll be able to receive help in your preferred language through bilingual service or bilingual staff, or through translation services, which accommodate more than 200 languages. And you can access support through our TTY service as well, if assistance is required via a teletype device. We also have education programs just like this one. You can take them on a webinar like you're doing now. Some of them are available in person in certain places, depending on lots of different factors, but these programs are available to you and they are free. And you can find out a little bit more information about these programs and where they are close to you at communityresourcefinder.org. And here is a little glance at that Community Resource Finder. If you visit this online tool, you can search for community living services, day programs, medical resources, and even more. And whether you're in the area or across the country, you can find services to help someone who is living with dementia and make the contacts that you all need to ensure safety and comfort. Another service that we provide is ALZ Connected. It's the association's very active online community for caregivers and for people living with the disease. ALZ Connected online message boards have over 50,000 members, and they all gather to share their thoughts, share their questions, share their ideas with each other, and it's happening 24 hours a day. And you can browse these forums without creating a profile, or you can create a profile if you'd like, but these can help you to learn directly from other caregivers and find out what people who are living the disease day in and day out are doing to make their lives easier for their loved one and for themselves. But if you want to post a message or a question, you do have to create a profile. So keep that in mind. We also have ALZ Navigator. And when you're facing this disease, there are so many things to consider, and Alzheimer's Navigator helps caregivers find some answers by creating a personalized action plan and linking some information, support, and local resources. It's a really great resource if you aren't comfortable talking with someone yet, if you just want to kind of get a sense of what is coming down the pipe and what you maybe should be doing. And that is the end of our program as far as the information that we have for you. So if you have any questions, again, feel free to enter them into the chat. I know that Megan Peterson did enter some information into the chat, some different links to the resources that I mentioned at the end of the program, and some information as well on CEU credits. So if you want to get a little bit more information from her, feel free to reach out or just enter those in the chat. If you have any questions, we are here to answer them. But thank you everybody for joining us today. We have one more for, do we have two more? Three more? We have a couple more.
Two more.
Two more. Okay. Two more. I was like, I know we have a few more. We have two more. So if you want to join us again next week, same time, same place, hopefully my computer will not spaz out and I can be here the entire time. But thank you everybody for joining. And if there are no further questions, I think we're good for the day.
Thank you.